We now move to the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywyd. First Minister, people in Wales with suspected cancer are already waiting substantially longer than people elsewhere for crucial diagnostic tests such as endoscopy tests. Now, note here I'm asking you specifically about diagnosis and not treatment. New NICE guidelines, if they're adopted, will add additional pressures on diagnostics capacity because more people will be referred by GPs for diagnosis. Can you inform the Assembly of whether or not it's your intention to adopt the new NICE guidelines, please?
Well, first of all, it's something that we'll consider, of course, but let's remind ourselves, when it comes to treatment, we are ahead of England. Well, what is the point of focusing on diagnosis and not treatment? I don't understand that at all. We can tell you what the diagnosis says, but we're not going to have any targets. You've realised the weakness in your argument now, but you're not going to have any targets with regard to treatment. That's not good enough. We have to look at the whole pathway. We're saying to people with cancer, well, you can get a diagnosis within 28 days, and that's not easy, clinically, actually, with some cancers either. But actually, there's no target in terms of your treatment. Then what use is that for an individual? We take the view that people should have diagnosis and treatment within an appropriate time, and we are well ahead of England in terms of being able to achieve
Jones.
that.
Can't be treated unless they've had a diagnosis, and that's where your government is falling down. Now, if you're unwilling to give us an answer as to whether or not you'll adopt the new NICE guidelines, perhaps you'll set out the government's position on the Independent Cancer Task Force recommendations. They recommend that by 2020, 95% of patients with suspected cancer will be referred by a GP, should receive a diagnosis or an all clear within 28 days. Now, this has been adopted in England, and of course the benefits of early diagnosis are clear. Not only does it save money, but more crucially, it saves people's lives. So is it your intention to adopt these recommendations in Wales too?
Well, first of all, anybody would agree that the earliest possible diagnosis is important. But I have to say to the Leader of Plaid Cymru, not having a target in terms of treatment is pointless. I mean, why would you say to people, well, we have a target to be diagnosed within 28 days, and no one's going to disagree with that the early diagnosis is important, but then to say to people, actually, we have no thoughts as to what happens afterwards, how does that help people? It tells people what their diagnosis is, but you have no target for treatment.
You twisted my words, First Minister. That is not what we've said. I am here to hold you to account for your government's actions, and I'm asking you about diagnostic waiting tests. Now, you have already conceded to my colleague Leanne Jones that waiting times here are worse than elsewhere. You admitted to her in answer to a question in April where she asked you, why are Scotland and England succeeding to provide scans within 6 weeks for 95% of their patients, while Wales manages to provide MRI scans for only 56% of our patients within 6 weeks? And you answered, those figures are correct, of course. There is scope, therefore, to improve the situation. So you've already conceded that point. Now, you must accept that demand on diagnostic capacity will increase whether the new guidelines are adopted or not, because we have an ageing population. Now, Plaid Cymru has announced plans for 3 new diagnostic centres to complement existing diagnostic capacity within the NHS. These centres will help to meet existing demand, but crucially will aid in meeting new increased demand in the future. You have called our proposals fantasy politics, but you don't seem to have any solutions of your own apart from tinkering around the edges. Now, perhaps you can enlighten us this afternoon. What is your solution to the diagnostic waiting times crisis that people are facing in this country, First Minister?
Well, as with all things, it's down to money, and we are investing in bringing down the diagnostic waiting times for all, not just for cancer, but for all diseases, and that is something that we're seeing now month after month. She's right to point out that we needed to bring those waiting times down, and that is something that we are doing. Now, she mentioned her own policy of 3 diagnostic centres. Well, that's for her to argue in the course of the next few months. It will cost between £90 and £150 million to set them up. with all the equipment that would be needed, and indeed the buildings. Now, that, in her mind, might be money that would be justifiable, but she'd have to explain how the system would actually work. But I come back to the point I made earlier on. She made the point, I want to ask you about cancer diagnosis, not treatment. I come back to the point that I made earlier on. You cannot simply say to people, you'll get a diagnosis within a certain time, but actually we can't give you a time within which you receive treatment. That makes no sense. Well, your own press releases, your own question this afternoon was about diagnosis. You said nothing about treatment times. You said nothing about treatment times. You have said that people can get a diagnosis in a certain amount of time. Well, clinically, it's not that easy for some people, because you can't diagnose cancer within 28 days necessarily. And secondly, you have abdicated your responsibility to say that people will get treatment within a particular time. You cannot have one without the other. We as a government have said we will make sure that people get appropriate treatment within appropriate time, within the 31-day target, within the 62-day target, and in that we are ahead of England. Our cancer treatment record in Wales is certainly better than anywhere else in the UK, and simply saying to people, we're going to tell you what's wrong with you, but we ain't going to treat you in time, is not good enough.
Right, we now move back